they're not supposed to do, right? So
today on the podcast, I have Amanda Thebe joining us. Her and Jen Gunter are probably the two go-to women for anything related to menopause. But something in Amanda's book that stands out apart from any other book is the fact that she does bring in a lot of personal experiences into it. It's a lot easier to understand what you're going through when someone explains it in the same context that you're feeling it. So with that, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your experience going through perimenopause and the experience you find most other women going through.
Thank you for having me on the show. Excited to be here, Ruby. And thank you for putting me in the same breath as Jen Gunter, who has now become a good friend of mine. But the difference is Jen is an OBGYN, she's a doctor, and I'm more of a patient advocate. But I think the reason that we've become friends is because I stay in my lane. I don't try and be a doctor, and I never have been. But I was a menopausal woman that went through literally one of the worst experiences of my life. It just was horrendous. I had 2 years of not knowing what was happening to me and going from someone who was pretty fit, you know, in the best place and the best shape of my life in my 40s to finding myself like crumbling and being less of a person than I expected to be and overwhelmed with symptoms. And then I got answers a couple of years later from a gynecologist, but I was left furious thinking, I'm someone who's been in the industry now 30 years and I know the body, and we do. And when we get to understand physiology and we understand like different populations, and this was a population that was never spoken about. And in fact, it was a population that is being just told just to get on with it and nothing changes. And oh my God, it couldn't be further from the truth. And so I started talking about my experience, built up a community like on Facebook, and across the platforms, I may have about 100,000 women now, because I was like, is anybody else the same as me? And they were. There was all these women that had these crazy symptoms that made no sense and couldn't get help when they went to their healthcare provider. And so that's why I ended up writing the book. And it was a really great experience for me because I could obviously put my expertise into that, like the whole lifestyle stuff that we do. Then I worked with doctors to be able to say to women, like, this is your best mate's guide to menopause. Like, this is what it is. These are the conversations you should be having with your doctor. This is how the doctor should treat you. These are some red flags, and then go forth and conquer, that type of thing. And so, but like, so the book's been out 3 years now, and I've tried to stay firmly in my lane as this patient advocate, someone who can say, hey, you're looking for something, I know where you can go for this. I know what the doctors are supposed to say. And women are still going through the same thing. There's such an uphill mountain for us to climb, but it's changing. It's changing slowly because people like you are having people like me on podcasts, and we're opening up the conversation. And I always say menopause is just a word that gets a little bit easier every time you say it. And chances are, if you say it out loud, other people will too, right?
Yeah, and it's almost like the word period, when period was something that was just something no one really wanted to say. And then there's like, it's like these women events that now that women are having more of a say in things, they're coming more into the mainstream, and people are understanding that, hey, we do not experience things the same way that men do. And I guess something that comes with that is the fact that we regulate our emotions differently. And when we're going through menopause, the shifts in our hormones with progesterone and estrogen, they do not have a single bit of constant. They are not even cycling. They're like jumping jacks and people throwing skittles at you. Like, you don't know which one's doing what. They just bounce everywhere. And with that comes a lot of symptoms. There comes a lot of emotional backlash, a lot of stress, a lot of all these things that people would just put down to, it must be this, it must be that. And then I'll let you talk on that as well. But in with that, people then go into Facebook groups and say, I need to balance my hormones. What supplements should I take? And it's like, if you're really needing to balance your hormones and you're in that stage of life, the supplements you need are the ones that a specialist can give you that start with H and end with RT or MHT. So with that, I will let you talk about the main symptoms that women start to experience and how it's not exactly menopause itself, but what menopause does to your life that kind of makes all these shifts?
So I think it's important to talk about there's different stages of menopause, because perimenopause is the time leading up to menopause. Menopause being the time when you haven't had your period for 12 months, and then after that, you're postmenopausal. So when you're in this perimenopausal phase for potentially 8 to 10 years, and you're from your late 30s to your 50s, this is when our symptoms decline, fall, and progesterone is actually quite a linear fall. It's quite a seismic quick drop, but the estrogen fluctuates down like a roller coaster in a very unconventional way that doesn't make a lot of sense. And part of me is like, it doesn't matter to you as a woman whether it's progesterone or estrogen. You just know that your hormones are making you feel really messed up, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. And because we know estrogen is probably the main player in the conversation, or estrogen, depending on where you live, that it can impact around 200 different systems in the body. So a lot of women will have neurological symptoms that don't almost feel like they are hormonal. So like if somebody's presenting with depression, anxiety, brain fog, any cognitive issues like hot flashes, which actually come from the thermoregulatory part of your brain, or migraines, any of those chronic fatigue is usually stems from like the brain not having the main energy source. Like estrogen is part of the energy fueling source. So all of these symptoms don't make a ton of sense, and women go to their doctor and they'll say, I think I'm depressed, or I've got brain fog, or I'm having these migraines. And doctors typically will actually treat them for those symptoms because of a lack of knowledge. And I firmly stand in the view of that most doctors are good people. There's shitty doctors, like the shitty everyone, the shitty trainers, right? We know that, but the majority of doctors go into the practice because they want to help people, but they don't know what they don't know. And we know that general practitioners, whatever they're called in Australia, GPs or primary care providers, don't get any menopause training at all. It's not in the curriculum. And then any OBGYNs in America, it's like one in 10, maybe less, get a few hours of menopausal training. There's like a massive knowledge gap. And so if I went to a doctor and said I'm struggling with migraines, they probably would give me migraine medication. Or if I had depression, they would probably give me depression medication because they want to help us. But the fact of the matter is that if you're a woman and you're over 45 and you're presenting with 2 or more symptoms that fall into the perimenopause, menopause category, the doctor should offer you menopause hormone therapy if you're a candidate, right? You should at least have the conversation about that. And now often that part of the conversation is not happening, right? But I can guarantee you that unless the woman knows it's perimenopause before she goes in, chances are the doctor's not going to tell her. And so to me, it's like, this is ridiculous, but women have to be the ones that are proactive, get this knowledge base, be understanding of what happens at this time of our life, so that they can go in and advocate for themselves and go, hey, you know what? I'm in perimenopause and I want you to help me, because I don't think they often know. And one of the best resources globally is the Australasian Menopause Society. It's literally one of the best. You have some of the best doctors, best researchers in the world working within the organization. And if anyone goes to menopause.org.au, there are tons of resources for you guys. There's a symptom tracker. It tells you what the hormone therapy options are for anyone in Australia and New Zealand, I suppose. And then there's also the non-hormonal treatment options, because guess what? Not everybody needs hormone therapy or can take it, right? And so I think that's a really important conversation as well, because I often hear people say, you're going through perimenopause and you've got symptoms, you should be on hormone therapy. Well, that's not how the medical organizations talk about menopause at all. They're like, yes, it should be offered to you if you're a candidate, but know that there are contraindications, like with every drug, right? It's still a drug. And that if it's good for you, it probably will work and make you feel better. But some women, it doesn't work, it doesn't make them feel better. Some women can never take it. Maybe they're breast cancer survivors. So I think, and some women never want to take it because they don't need to, right? We're all different, we're all unique. And I think that, to me, if the conversation only talks about hormone therapy, we're not including everyone. And it's really important to include everyone. And then to go back to the point you said about when people go in these Facebook groups, of which I have one, which is really hard, they're really hard to manage, by the way, when you've got thousands of women in. and they'll say, how do you balance your hormones? The first answer should be, well, you can't, because that's just a stupid thing to say. Your hormones are dynamic and they fluctuate, and they're meant to do that. That's sort of how they work. They interact with one another. But if you want to sort of calm your menopause hormonal symptoms, then one of the best ways to do that is with hormone therapy. Supplements, chances aren't going to do a lot for you. Not that we're aware of.
People always throw out there is that they do need to balance their hormones, and it's like, what hormones need balancing? Do you actually get a blood test, or you just feel like they're off? And this is where that whole hormonal treatment does come in. And with the hormonal treatment, there are people that shout out to get bioidentical, and also at the same time they don't really know what they're looking for, so then they go to, let's just say, some naturopath who then prescribes a whole list of other things, and things that aren't really passed through the Menopause Society. So what is it that you recommend with MHT, and also clearing up the myth, unless of course you have a history of it, that taking MHT causes breast cancer?
So it's a really great question, and honestly, women's best resource in your neck of the woods is the Australasian Menopause Society. I hope everyone just goes to that anyway. But if anybody sort of wants to know like what the medical organizations recommend, they recommend the regulated hormones. Now, I don't know what the regulatory body is called in Australia. You know, we have Canada Health, we have the FDA, we have the NHS in the UK. I don't know what the equivalent is, the equivalent medical body is in Australia. Essentially, you've got unregulated and you've got regulated hormones. Imagine the fact that every prescription medication you take, every over-the-counter paracetamol or aspirin or anything, they're all regulated hormones, and they're regulated medication, sorry. And mostly supplements aren't. I'm pretty sure it's the same in Australia. They aren't regulated, right? So by regulated, it means it's gone through extreme testing for efficacy, safety, how it absorbs into the body, all of those things. And so it means that if anyone ever went to the place where they produce them and they took one single tablet or piece of the medicine, it would always be identical, all the same, because it's regulated. And so they're the safest that we know for women. And so when it comes to bioidentical hormones for women, there are regulated bioidentical hormones available. So you don't need to go down the unregulated route. And what bioidentical means is that they're almost similar to the hormones your body produces. And then what's happened is that the private clinics out there, or some naturopaths as well, will say, well, come to us because we do the natural bioidentical hormones that are mixed and perfect for you. And that's a sales pitch, right? That's not supported. And it's a sales pitch because what the compounded pharmacists do that mix these hormones is they take the regulated ones that you already know are safe, and they mix them, I always say with like a bit of sawdust and mouse poo, I don't really know what's in them, but into a compounded mixture that then changes these regulated ones into an unknown substance. And then they cost hundreds of dollars because you're paying privately for them. And so for me, I would say to a woman, why do you need those when you've got safer, cheaper, more available options there for you that you can take, right? And if it's because you've been sold that these are safer or cheaper or safer or more natural, then that's a lie. That's marketing. And so you want to put the safest thing in your body that you possibly can. The menopause societies think that menopause hormone therapy is safe, and the risk of breast cancer is statistically insignificant, right, for the majority of women, but not for all women. Right. So if you, for example, if you've got a breast cancer that's estrogen fed, then you're not likely to be a candidate, right? So it really, those things come down to your conversation with your oncologist and your menopause specialist as an individual person, but it's taking hormone therapy won't give you cancer if you're a candidate for taking it, if that's the question you're asking. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a big fear that a lot of people have, and that, like you said, the history of it.
Right, yeah, it came from a historic. There was a study that actually came out and said that the risk of taking hormone therapy increased breast cancer, and for the most part, even though the WHI who made the announcement are a really great study and there's been some great outcomes, that's one of the ones that's never been completely agreed upon by the researchers. And so The women who were part of that study were all over 60. They had comorbidities. They were overweight, maybe had diabetes, other heart conditions that already put them at high risk for breast cancer anyway. They weren't women in perimenopause. And that's the big thing, right? It wasn't the perfect subgroup.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for clarifying that part. While we're on the topic of HRT, have you seen an occurrence of women getting prescribed birth control for MHT?
So I know we keep saying HRT and MHT, and they're the same thing. By the way, it depends which country you're in. I know in the UK, they call it HRT, hormone replacement therapy. In Canada, where I am, and in North America, they call it menopause hormone therapy. And the reason there's a difference is because in Canada and North America, and I think in Australia too, if you are under the age of 45, that is, and you go completely into menopause, meaning you stop getting your periods, that's considered to be early menopause. Between the ages of 40 and 45, that's early menopause. Not when you start getting symptoms, when your periods completely stop, right? Anything before the age of 40, if you stop getting your periods, it's premature menopause or primary ovarian insufficiency, POI, right? So, but the premature menopause and the early menopause are considered conditions that fall outside of the natural life phase that is menopause. And so they're usually treated with higher doses of hormones. And especially for the women in premature menopause, because they lose all of those hormones and need them till at least the average age of menopause, which is 51. And so sometimes they will go on a birth control pill, which is a higher dose of hormones, just to make sure they're protected, like the protective elements of estrogen and progesterone are there. Typically, though, hormone therapy is super low level and birth control is a higher level. So they're not sort of comparable, but there are some low dosage birth control pills, and some women do well on them. And honestly, that then comes down to the specialist that's dealing with a woman and the woman who's looking to get help, right? But it's not a definite no, though, for sure. It's definitely in the indications of available medication, but it's typically not what's prescribed.
So now going back to the symptoms, sweats are probably one of the most common symptoms that are out there. And others come down to restless legs and constipation as well. What are other symptoms you see? I know that there's the brain and your cognition that come into this, and I really want you to touch on that. And also the fact that there are some weirder symptoms like joint pain and those other things that can be a symptom of menopause.
It was really funny that you said like constipation. Like that's not normally one that people say, but what we tend to talk about are the ones we hear. So if your clients are saying, I can't go to the toilet anymore, for sure, like they're gonna stick with us. And interestingly enough, I've never had a hot flash. Like I think I had one when I had COVID, of all things, but like it's not something I've struggled with, but it is definitely one of the things that women struggle with most. And I did a Twitter post the other day, and I was like, what's the worst symptom, or what's the most unusual symptom that you had with perimenopause that you didn't expect? Because I think we expect hot flashes, maybe some mood swings, maybe irregular periods. They're the ones we sort of hear about, right? And anxiety came up. Like I literally had hundreds of responses, and anxiety was the one that had the biggest sort of response, which was really interesting. But we know that the brain changes shape during perimenopause and sort of adapts and then regrows again in postmenopause. And it adapts because we're losing that reproductive function of our body, right? And so when we know that happens, women get tons of neurological symptoms that literally are like really weird. And sometimes that happens before their periods change. So if you're presenting with depression and insomnia and joint pain and all of these symptoms, they tend not to make a lot of sense because you don't usually think that they're hormonal, right? You wouldn't consider those to be hormonal. Some of the other things to consider are the genitourinary symptoms of menopause, which nobody wants to talk about, but we have to. And that's the fact that our pelvis, our vulva, vagina, labia, all of those things need estrogen. And when that goes, it's not fun. Women get reoccurring UTIs, bacterial infections, painful sex, dry vagina, and the list goes on and on and on. And honestly, most women would do really well on a localized estrogen cream, which means it doesn't leave that area. You can use it and it comes in different forms. And even women who are contraindicated for hormone therapy can do really well on that. And then moisturizers and lubrications, that's like huge, and that can impact women on a self-esteem level. But some unusual symptoms are things like tinnitus, dry mouth, bleeding gums, itchy eyes, itchy skin. Itchy skin, there's one thing called formication, which is not fornication, formication, and it feels like, I know, I wish it was formication, but the formication feels like little ants running under your skin and you just can't get them. Oh, it's the most crazy thing. And real itchy skin, worsening allergies. I mean, there's at least 34 symptoms more, right? And when we did a survey here in Canada, 46%, so 1 in 2 women, had no idea of the truly surprising array of symptoms. And that's terrible. Like, that knowledge gap is maddening, right? That it's just not fair that women don't know. Drives me crazy, truthfully.
I just went to stalk you to pull up that post. And I'm also seeing things like fluttering heart rate, high blood pressure, something that I would guess people see. Oh yeah, there's insomnia as well, where people would, so that would have to do a lot with progesterone and estrogen.
Chances are, it's I mean, who knows, right? But progesterone has got like a very calming effect on our body, right? So the idea that we and that's why anxiety might come into play as well, because we sort of lose the progesterone quite quickly and fast and in the beginning. And so insomnia, like not being able to get to sleep and then panicking because you're not getting to sleep and you've lost that protective or that calming influence of progesterone. And then women waking up in the middle of the night, maybe with hot flashes, but then can't get back to sleep again. Like insomnia is like it's brutal and it's not fair. So trying to find ways to, if you don't take hormone therapy, that induce that type of calming thing, which is, like your mindfulness stuff, like even exercising, but not too late, just at the right time, maybe some magnesium, things that actually bring like a calming element back into our life, right? But it's no fun. And the insomnia, I think women struggle with insomnia way more than men. And I think that it's one of those symptoms that just really impacts women because of the knock-on effect of not sleeping. When you don't sleep, everything else goes to shit, right? Everything. And it's horrible. So yeah.
I feel like the two that kind of feed a cycle of just a shitty experience is the anxiety and the stress and the sleep, because stress increases all your symptoms, and then all your symptoms start to create more stress, and then it just becomes a feeding loop.
To me, those are the two things in life, not just in perimenopause, that I think that people don't think are that impactful, but are hugely impactful, right? Like, and there's different ways of tackling them, and none of them are quick, and all of them take time and consistency and continually showing up and doing the things that help, going out for a walk even when you don't feel like it, and not drinking as much because you really want to drink, and all of these different things that we know can promote reduction in our stress response, and exercising more so that we have a better stress response. And instead of telling women not to exercise because it makes our stress worse, fucking hell, it drives me crazy. It just drives me crazy.
It does. Something I really want to highlight right now is you can lose visceral fat without changing your diet just by exercising. And that's not saying you are losing fat because you're not in a deficit. It's saying that you're losing visceral fat. Moves from your visceral area to the subcutaneous area. Like, you can mobilize it. And it's that visceral area, that abdomen where everyone gets it, that is the most dangerous of all fats. But with that,
but you know what, Ruby, about that? What's difficult about that is that we don't know. Unless we're going for DEXA scans and we're getting imaging done, we don't know what amount of visceral fat we've got or what amount of subcutaneous fat. And anyone who's listening, I hope you're listening, who's listening, and subcutaneous is the jiggly fat. And like Ruby said, the visceral fat is the one around our organs that we don't see. And I always think a really good example of that is when you see those old men with those big fat, round, hard bellies, right? That they've got an accumulation of visceral fat. So just losing fat in general is going to be helpful in that case, because you don't know. You just don't know what type of fat you've got, right?
Yeah, that's why focusing on getting to a healthy body fat is important. And I wanted to just shout out a chapter at you so that you can actually talk a little bit on it. And why am I so bloody fat?
Oh, right. So it was really funny when my husband was reviewing the book. I was like, you got to read it to make sure it's okay, because he's in it, but and it's just fact based. And my son went out and he came back in the house and went, "What's your dad doing?" He went, "Oh, he's just trying to find out why you're so bloody fat." And so he was reading my book. But I don't actually talk about fat loss and weight loss very much in my job, because I actually find it too emotive. I find it something that I don't want to take on, even though I've got a nutritional science background. I don't enjoy it. I'd rather teach women to fuel and to just feel better and eat the fucking food and all of those things. The question that comes up all the time is, I'm doing the same thing and nothing's changed. Why am I putting on weight? And they blame menopause and they blame metabolism straight away. And so I wanted to dig into that because I also put weight on myself, and it wasn't a significant amount, but I'm also not a very big person. And so when I put weight on, it felt wrong. I didn't like it, right? So I was like, this is all menopause. This is the reason. And then every single piece of research paper I found was saying, well, no, it's not. There's no evidence to say that. And I'm like, but that doesn't make sense. But what we do know, though, is that the energy balance works, and it always will work, right? Like, we know that the food we eat is calorie driven, and energy that we burn, whether it's at rest or whether when we're eating or exercising, is measured in the form of calories. And so when you've got to balance those scales somehow, but all of a sudden that becomes truly difficult in perimenopause and menopause, because all of a sudden we know women don't move as much. We know their activity reduces significantly. We know that their food choices decline. And we know that their food choices really need to be looked at, because when you've got a higher stress level, chances are you're going to crave foods that you don't normally have. And so maybe you don't make the best food choices. And we know that because there's studies to show that. We know that metabolism doesn't take a big hit. The Ponza study, that really is the go-to study for metabolism, has shown that when they looked at lifespan, that metabolism doesn't really change until the age of 60, when it goes down about 0.7%. There's no real seismic shift in menopause. And if it is, it's probably like 2 squares of chocolate or something. Like, it's not enough to make a conversation about. But we know that fat deposits change. We know that fat deposits go from like our hips and our thighs, which we need for our childbearing years, going towards our belly more, which you've already talked about. We know that hunger hormones are impacted in this cascade of hormonal fluctuations. Ghrelin and leptin are all over the place going, I'm always hungry and I'm never satisfied. And so then you eat and you're never full. And that also adds to the conversation. And so you also mentioned something about, clients being constipated, have an irritable bowel, whatever that is, whether that's gas or whether that's like, not being able to go to the toilet or going to the toilet too much. Estrogens within our intestines too. So all of these things can make women bloated and appear a different shape. So much is going on. But then if we get down to the crux of the matter as well, we also know how important lean mass is as we get older, right? And so we know that muscle protein synthesis, the idea that we take our amino acids from protein and feed our musculoskeletal system, is impacted through perimenopause. And what that means is that we're not holding on to muscle, and we're not like that Ferrari anymore. Everyone, when I say that, people are like, I don't have any muscle, I've only got jiggly bits, but we've all got muscle under there somehow. And it's really important to hold on to those. And so it's a combination of all of these things that just make weight loss really much more difficult. But I also will say that if weight loss is something you want to do, you can do it. Women do it. Menopause makes it harder, but it doesn't make it impossible. Like, it's just, you might need to look at your lifestyle differently. You might need to look at the food, the habits, all of those things differently. And it's not easy. Never said it was, but
yeah. And when it comes to, I guess this is why I'm so passionate about what I do as well. I heard something that was really powerful. The more muscle you have on your frame as you enter the menopausal years, the higher of a level you have to fall from. And the thing is, if you continue exercising and you continue feeding that, you can actually fight the same act, like the loss of muscle mass, and fight bone loss, which is something I want you to talk about, in what actually happens when you're not having the same estrogen production anymore.
And it's a great question, and it's really good to talk about, because women who are going through I always say perimenopause, because that tends to be when people are most symptomatic, even though it can go into menopause for a certain amount of time. But you don't feel like exercising a lot of the time. You can't even get off the sofa. Like, the idea of going for a run or skipping or lifting heavy weights doesn't even feel doable, right? And I am really keen to sort of say to women, it might not feel like you're achieving much by going out for a 10-minute walk, but you are. You've got to look for these wins all the time because they compound, they add up, they mean something, they don't mean nothing. And so if someone's like hearing this and going, but I don't have the energy to do this, commit to doing something you can do. Find something you like. Maybe it's swimming. Go and swim for half an hour a couple of times a week. Just start doing something because it all adds up. But if you can proactively have strength going into menopause, well, one of the things we know is it can really reduce our vasomotor symptoms, like significantly, between 50 and 70%. I often wonder whether that's why I didn't have the hot flashes and night sweats and stuff, right? Because I was always strength training. I really struggled with my menopause despite being fit and healthy. And I think that's something we can talk about as well. You're not particularly immune just because you're fit. Genetics play a huge role in this, of course, as well. But I think that when we go through to menopause, into postmenopause, we're now at this new landscape of hormones, right? This lower level of hormones where our bones and our muscle, our heart, our brain all need like stimulation, and that can come from exercise. In fact, it's probably the best way you can support your body for longevity and getting older, right? And so our bones, the osteoblasts, that I always do this with my hands, and I don't even know if people can see me, but they're fed by estrogen. And so when we don't have that sort of stimulus anymore, we got to find it. And we've got to find it with strength training. We've got to find it with a bit of jumping, and we've got to find it with impact. And it's doable. You're not doomed to break your bone just because you've been through menopause. You're not doomed to have a heart attack just because you've been through menopause, but your risk profile changes. And if you know you're at a higher risk, then you can do something about it, right? Whether that includes hormone therapy or not, that's up to you or you and your doctor, but it should include all of the stuff that we talk about. It's crucial, in fact, right? If we could make women do one thing, it'd be like, try strength training 2 times a week, maybe 3, give it a go,
Yeah, I love that. And with that as well, I had Dr. Scotty Forbes on in just a couple of episodes ago.
I don't know Scotty Forbes. Who's that?
He is the top researcher of creatine. And I was just going to say,
yeah,
as you age, creatine becomes a lot more beneficial, especially as a woman, because we need estrogen. Like without estrogen, it's hard to convert the inactive creatine in our body to the active creatine in our body. So it is something that's also beneficial for you to then take into exercise, because then it's not only going to help you with your performance, which then helps the bone and the muscle, but it gives you some of that, I guess, that water retention in the muscles that the estrogen also can't do anymore.
And not everyone gets the water retention. I take it and it doesn't make me bloated or anything. And I think usually that sort of settles down anyway. And I don't load. I just take like a spoonful a day when I remember. But actually, I mean, in addition to being super beneficial for that, we know the impact it has on the brain. Yeah. So, and especially because one of the things that women say all the time is, oh, I don't think I can cope. I'm not able to be as sharp as I was and function as quickly as I was. And we know that this is something, it's not super expensive, it's tasteless, it's well researched, all of those things. Like it's a bit of a no-brainer. But I'm actually really bad at taking it. So I say that and I never take it. I look at it every day and go, I'll do it tomorrow. I'm like really bad.
But I've started putting it in like my iced coffee now. So it's like, I always have a nice coffee. I have it every day. So I'll be able to have my creatine every day. Talking into the thing that I love most about what you do for the menopausal community is the personal stuff that you bring into it. And I know that there was something in there to do with brain fog that you related to your own personal experience. I think it was brain fog. What else? I think it was.
Oh, I remember now. I see. I talk all the time. I can't remember. Sorry.
But anything like your own personal experiences that maybe other people can relate to, and other things that you've heard people within your own circle relate to you. Yeah.
Well, actually, the thing that was terrible for me, Ruby, is I was 42 and I just started my own business. Like I've always been in fitness, but I decided to like really build it up. I was in Toronto at the time. It was going so well. I had like tons of clients and loved it. And I started getting like really dizzy. And it was almost like I had vertigo and the room was like this. And then I would start losing feeling. only on the right side of my face. And if I could give you a visual, it was like having a claw coming over the right side of my face and gripping my eye and gripping my face and chin. And then it would run down my right arm and my hand would claw and I couldn't open my hand. It was awful. And then it would like progress and get worse. And then I would have to crawl on the floor and then I'd start being sick and it would last 2 or 3 days and then it would go. And so I thought it was a virus that would get better, but it sort of didn't. It kept getting worse. And eventually my doctor was like, I think it might be something to do with your brain. Why don't we send you to a neurologist? Then spent 2 years in the Canadian healthcare system seeing specialist after specialist, having test after test. It must have cost the healthcare system tens of thousands of dollars. And every time they kept saying, well, we can see you're not well, but we don't know what it is. I was starting to lose my mind. It was so distressing. And then I went to a gynecologist for a routine appointment about something else completely. And he just said, you all right? And I started crying, like you do. And I just said, I told him my story and I was like, and he sat there and he went, you know what? This is perimenopause. Are you like an A-type personality that always gets stuff done? I'm like, no, I'm like a B plus. And I went, but I'm not at the moment. Like I'm barely functioning. I look in the mirror and I do not like what I see. And I can't make it through a day without crying. And I don't like people anymore. And I just become this person that I just didn't recognize. And he was like, yes, I see this day in and day out. First of all, that dizziness and feeling and numbness is a migraine with aura. That's a known symptom. And I'm like, is it? Because I've just been to a neurologist for 2 years and he never said it was a migraine. And so he started treating me for migraines actually, and they went like that. And then he was like, you have depression. And I'm like, me? Depressed? And then I was like, fucking hell, I actually think I am. And then I was peeing myself. And I was like, I had 2 kids in my late 30s, never peed myself in my life. And all of a sudden now I pee just by kids making me jump. And it was like all of these things just kept compounding and compounding, compounding. And he normalized it. And then that's when I started talking about it. And people are like, that's me too. I feel the same way. Like it's exactly the same. And then these other symptoms. And it's sort of how we learn, isn't it? By these shared experiences. And I just think that me talking about like not being able to function and being stuck on the sofa for 3 days with these migraines, and then people telling me that they didn't think there was anything wrong with me, was something I hear all the time from women all the time, because we're tired of being misunderstood. We're tired of being ignored. We're tired of being gaslit by doctors who may know or probably don't know, right? And so I think the only way to sort of deal with it is, read my book, because I try and explain this. Go to the Australasian Menopause Society that leads you step by step through everything you need to know. It's like the idiot's guide to menopause. And I'm not saying you're all idiots, women, because we're not, but it's just that like there's a brilliant resource for you, right? And then when you go to your doctor, if you're feeling like shit, print stuff off, highlight it and go, this is what I want you to talk to you about. This is what's available. And if you can't help me, I want a referral. Like we have to stand up, because it makes me angry to think that women aren't getting the service that they need. And that service may or may not include hormone therapy. I think that that's not too much to ask.
Yeah, I loved that whole thing, because I do feel like talking about how you experience it makes it a lot more human for anyone that's listening. And you can hear the symptoms labeled off like that, but when you actually hear how it can impact your life, it's something that you feel like, hey, I'm not alone in this. But I can't remember how you said it. Perimenopause is the
great unsettling. Yeah,
That's
I said perimenopause is the great unsettling, and postmenopause you feel the most settled. And here's why I think that, right? Because the majority of women, when they go into postmenopause, in the 3 to 5 year window when things start to calm down, feel like most of their symptoms have calmed down. It might feel a different place to be in. It's not particularly a bad place, but we don't do well with change as humans, right? But the unsettling of perimenopause has got women reeling. They just don't know what's going on. And so that's sort of, I feel like, just a really good description of sort of what I've gone through, what other women tell me about. And I just don't see why it should be that way.
Thank you. I guess that covers everything I wanted to say. Is there anything else that you want to put out there for other women to hear in terms of coming up to this period of time, things that they can do to safeguard themselves, like building muscle?
Yes. Yeah.
How that actual lead up can lead to a better, although you're not immune from an outcome. Because I know I also hear people saying, why is this happening to me? I'm doing everything right. Like, it doesn't make you
I
any
know we can't go down blame or shame. It doesn't get us anywhere. It's the same, like women who get cancer, I'm sure have all of these questions, and yet typically you're never going to know, right? I went through that with, and I'm not comparing cancer with perimenopause, by the way, just to clarify. But when I was going through perimenopause, I kept thinking, why me? Like, I've literally invested my whole life trying to be super healthy and care for myself. And I'm like flawed by this, and I'm not seeing other people like this around me. I got COVID. It took me 17 weeks to get better. I had long COVID, and then last year I got it again, and it took another 18, 20 weeks to get better. And I'm just like, maybe I'm just that person, right? And so I've stopped like digging too deep, like, why is that me? Because maybe it is just me, right? Maybe that's the way it is. But first of all, we need to remove the blame or shame, and remember that every single woman will go through menopause, and that's 51% of the population. And so if we know that we need to accommodate and listen and educate them all. It's the least that they deserve. So any woman going who's in her 30s, I would love them to be educated. I would love them to go into this with like prepared readiness, as though to say, I know there is potentially a shitstorm coming. It might be fine for me, but there may be a time when I'm going to need help. I need to know as much as humanly possible about this, right? So go to the medical resources for that. And then the other thing I was going to say is then talk to people about it, have open communication, because the minute you keep it to yourself, then it's doubled. The stress is doubled. When you share an experience like this, it definitely lessens the burden. And then the last thing is consider this to be, it is a menopause transition. That's what it's called. And the idea is that you're going, the light at the end is like a tunnel, not a cave, right? There is a light at the other side. And it's actually a pretty fucking brilliant place to be. I have to tell you, like, I never thought I'd be able to say, oh my God, I really like where I am right now. And it comes with its own challenges, you know, like it's harder for me to maintain muscle, but I'm trying really hard. And, you know, but women I speak to feel this calmness. They feel this like almost like superpower that they can shift boundaries, say no more, you know, feel more secure and confident in themselves. And if it really just takes an 8 to 10 year period of like helping women through that to get to that stage, then we have to do all we can to make that happen.
And ask yourself the question, what can I do to make myself feel better in this moment today?
Right now. Yeah, right now. Look for the small wins. That's perfect, Ruby. Like, don't think big, think small all the time. If you get up on that morning and you feel like dog poo and you're like, I'm not going to do anything, find something that gives you a win that day that makes you feel better about yourself, because it really matters.
I can see why a lot of people really resonate with your book now. I'm going to put that link below. It's
menopocalypse. Yeah, menopocalypse.
I was twisted trying to say it. Menopocalypse.
Keep going. You can do it, Ruby. I believe in you.
Menopocalypse.
There you go. Once you say it, yeah, and also my website, I have like links as well. If people want menopause resources, just amandathebe.com. But yeah, there's plenty of resources out there. There's plenty of great people talking about it, and Australia's leading the way in a lot of the research, thankfully. So you guys are pretty lucky as it goes.
Yeah, and we're also ones that have the healthcare system as well.
So yes, do. Yeah.
It's a great benefit there. Thank you so much for coming on. Is there any last words that you want to say?
No, I think we're good. And just like women, you can do this. Like, reach out if you've got any questions. Come and follow me on Instagram. I'll keep you entertained.
I'm gonna also link your. I'm in it. I've been in it since 2016, I think. I'll link your Facebook group in there as well.
So menopausing so hard. Yeah.
That'll be awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure.
It was really nice to see you. Thank you for reaching out. Take care.